Today is June 24th, 2025, and the world just collectively held its breath. President Donald Trump has announced a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran, a move no one saw coming. This isn't just a pause, it's a full stop after weeks of violence that nearly tipped the region into all-out war. For people in Tel Aviv, Tehran, and everywhere in between, the constant fear of air raid sirens and missiles might finally be over, at least for now. The announcement followed intense, secret diplomacy, with mediators racing to prevent catastrophe. The ceasefire's terms are still under wraps, but both sides have agreed to halt all offensive military actions. Just days ago, the US had launched airstrikes on Iran, and Iran responded with missile barrages on Israeli cities. The rhetoric was apocalyptic. Peace seemed impossible. So when Trump declared a ceasefire, it shocked the world and left everyone scrambling to understand what comes next. The big question, will this peace hold? A ceasefire isn't a peace treaty, it's just a pause. The world is watching, hoping this fragile moment becomes a turning point, but knowing the risks are far from over. For now, the guns are silent, but the future is anything but certain. Subscribe, like, share Cosmo Academia. How did we reach this boiling point? The conflict didn't erupt overnight. Tensions had simmered for years, but things exploded in mid-June when Israel launched airstrikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, aiming to cripple Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran hit back hard, launching waves of missiles at Israeli cities and military bases, escalating the fight to a direct state-on-state war. The world watched as explosions lit up the night sky over Israel. Then, on June 22nd, the US entered the fray. Two bombers dropped bunker busters on Iran's most fortified nuclear sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. President Trump called the strikes a spectacular success, claiming Iran's enrichment facilities were destroyed. This direct US intervention turned a regional crisis into a global one. Before the strikes, Trump had given a 2-week deadline for diplomacy, but that window slammed shut. Iran vowed retaliation, and the world braced for the worst. In this supercharged environment, the surprise ceasefire was hammered out. The rapid escalation forced all sides to seek an off-ramp. Now the world is left with a fragile agreement and a region on edge. The question remains, what happens next? Behind the headlines, the human cost is staggering. In Iran, Israeli and American airstrikes killed at least 865 people and wounded over 3,300, families shattered, communities devastated. High-ranking commanders, like Saeed Izadi of the Quds Force, were among the dead. But civilians bore the brunt. Craters, collapsed buildings, and a scarred landscape remain. In Israel, Iranian missiles killed 25 and injured nearly 700, with Haifa hit especially hard. Sirens forced Israelis into bomb shelters, creating a climate of fear and trauma. The psychological toll is immense. Every siren, every explosion leaves a mark. Both societies are wounded, and the scars will last long after the ceasefire. The pain endures. Healing will take far longer than rebuilding. The leaders' words fueled the fire as much as their weapons. President Trump's statements swung from threats to triumph, calling the US strikes a spectacular success and warning Iran not to retaliate. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu praised Trump, calling the strikes a historic move that protected Israel's future. For Israel, this was validation of its hardline stance against Iran's nuclear ambitions. Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian, vowed devastating retaliation if attacks continued, projecting defiance and resolve. Iran's foreign minister dismissed diplomacy while bombs fell, rallying domestic support. Publicly, leaders talked tough, even as secret talks sought a way out. Their rhetoric painted a world on the brink, making the sudden ceasefire all the more dramatic. The pivot from confrontation to negotiation was as swift as it was unexpected. Now, the world waits to see if words can build peace as quickly as they fueled war. Subscribe, like, share Cosmo Academia. At the heart of this crisis is Iran's nuclear program. The world has long feared Iran might build a bomb. The IAEA recently reported enough uranium for up to 9. But having material isn't the same as having a weapon. US intelligence said Iran wasn't actively building one. The US and Israeli strikes targeted Iran's nuclear infrastructure, aiming for a knockout blow. Trump claimed the threat was neutralized, but the reality is murkier. Destroying facilities doesn't erase knowledge. Scientists and engineers remain. Iran claims it moved most enriched uranium before the bombs hit, preserving key assets. An advisor to Ayatollah Khamenei warned that Iran's nuclear know-how is intact. The program is set back but not erased. The ceasefire gives the world a window for diplomacy, But the core issue is unresolved. The knowledge and tensions remain. Any lasting peace must address the nuclear question head-on. The world watched and reacted fast. The UN condemned the US strikes, warning of a wider war, but could do little to stop the violence. At the Security Council, Iran and Israel traded accusations, while the UN became a stage for global outrage. Russia and China condemned the US, calling the strikes illegal and warning of catastrophic consequences. The conflict became another front in the global rivalry between the US and its competitors. European powers, France, Germany, the UK, urged de-escalation, but their influence was limited as war raged. Their relief at the ceasefire is palpable. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey watched anxiously, fearing the conflict would spill over and destabilize the region. Publicly neutral, privately panicked, they know how quickly chaos can spread. The ceasefire is a moment to exhale, but the world remains on edge. The crisis exposed deep geopolitical divides. The next moves will shape the region and the world. The conflict's impact rippled far beyond the battlefield. Civilians scrambled to escape. The US and other nations evacuated citizens, underscoring the fear of escalation. Airlines rerouted flights, and Iran's internet was disrupted, isolating millions. Iran's parliament threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz, rattling global oil markets. Oil prices surged, and financial markets swung wildly. Paradoxically, Israel's stock market soared after the US strikes, as investors bet on increased security. For ordinary people, the disruptions were profound. Another blow to Iran's struggling economy, and daily life in Israel ground to a halt. The ceasefire stopped the missiles, but recovery, economic and psychological, will take much longer. The world saw how quickly violence in one region can shake the globe. The scars of this conflict will linger in ways numbers can't capture. Subscribe, like, share Cosmo Academia. So what does this ceasefire actually mean? First, the shooting stops. Airstrikes, missiles, and immediate threats are paused. Civilians get relief, and aid can finally reach those in need. But this is a fragile, temporary peace, a truce, not a treaty. The deep animosity, nuclear fears, and regional rivalries remain unresolved. The ceasefire simply puts the conflict on hold. Its durability depends on political will and effective diplomacy. The coming days will test whether both sides stick to the deal or if provocations unravel it. Negotiations must tackle the toughest issues: nuclear monitoring, security guarantees, and real compromise. The international community, especially the US, Russia, China, and Europe, must step up. This is a window for dialogue, not a guarantee of peace. The real work starts now, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As the dust settles, the future is uncertain. The best-case scenario, the ceasefire holds, leading to real negotiations and a comprehensive agreement on Iran's nuclear program and regional security. It would be a long, tough process, but could bring lasting stability. The worst case, the ceasefire is just a pause, with both sides rearming for the next round. Deep mistrust could trigger renewed violence at any moment, dragging in more powers and escalating the crisis. The US role is pivotal. Will Trump push for diplomacy or return to maximum pressure? The upcoming US election could shift the region's fate. For people in Israel and Iran, hope is fragile. They yearn for peace, but know how quickly it can vanish. The coming months are critical. The world is watching to see if this truce becomes a turning point or just a brief pause in a long, tragic conflict. The stakes have never been higher. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and share. Join the Cosmo Academia community for more updates.